Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Preserving History and Democracy. My name is Cynthia Mendoza, Communications Coordinator with the Doñana County Clerk's Office, and I am joined today by our amazing producer, Bernardine Caporale. How are you, Bern?
I'm great. I'm really happy to be here today.
Yes, we are somewhere a little different today. Do you want to let our audience know where we are?
Well, if you've been listening to our podcast, you'll know that the impact of the railroads on Las Cruces was something immense. So today we're at the Las Cruces Railroad Museum on North Mesilla, and we have Mr. Kyle McGregor with us today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
We're ready to roll, just like the railroad. Hopefully our yard engine will show up while you're here.
Absolutely. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am one of the museum curator educators here. I am the only one that actually has working railroad experience. As I remarked to Ms. Caporale one day, I started jumping freight trains at the age of 6 or 7 to avoid a mile-long walk home. Unfortunately, the conductor caught me and made me ride the caboose, which was fine and dandy, but then I ended up migrating to the engine cab. And by the time I was in high school, I was running the engine on the local freights.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But I've also been a park ranger, a blacksmith, and probably 10 or 12 other things, because I'm from West Virginia, and if you're not in the steel mill or the coal mine, you move.
You've done it all.
So many people, kids and adults alike, love trains. Why do you think they love trains so much? Is it about the possibility of change? What is it about?
As a historian, all I can say is that it has had a fascination for thousands and millions of people, probably since the first steam engine ran in England in 1803 at a coal mine. Then when they moved to the U.S. in the 1830s and 40s, well, suddenly we had a way to get across country very, very fast. But a locomotive engineer up to probably 1960 stood in the eyes of the average child about the way an astronaut does today.
Ah, yes.
The power of the machine, the ability of it to move things. Just as a footnote, locomotive in Latin means it is a place that moves. A place, not a thing.
Can you tell us about the history of the train coming to Las Cruces instead of Mesilla, which was a bigger town back then?
The story I have is that when the line out front was built in 1881 from El Paso to Albuquerque by the Santa Fe, they made an offer to the people of Mesilla. They said, if you give us space for a railroad station and a yard, we'll build our line through your town. Well, the answer was probably akin to sticking your thumb in your nose and wiggling your fingers. They didn't want the railroad for whatever purpose. And the people in Las Cruces, which was much the smaller village at the time, bought a chunk of land from the local rancher and said, okay, here's space for your yard, your station. We'll take the railroad. Well, shortly thereafter, Las Cruces lost the county courthouse because it wasn't on the railroad, and Las Cruces was. And of course, Las Cruces is going to grow for that time and place almost exponentially in population. And next time you're out here by the railroad station, almost everything on Las Cruces Street between Alameda and the depot is the first subdivision built by the New Mexico or Las Cruces Land Company in the 1870s, 80s, and 90s, and you'll see the architecture change because of the railroad.
So these four men were very forward-thinking. They were William Reinerson, Henry Cuniff, Simon Bolivar Newcomb, and Jacinto Armijo. They're the ones that got together as a town, the Las Cruces Town Company, and had this incredible idea to buy the land so that the railroad could come here. What are some of the changes that took place because the railroad actually did come to Las Cruces?
Well, from the records I've seen, the railroad gets here about the middle of April 1881. And I've not been able to lay my hands on the U.S. Census records for various reasons. But apparently Las Cruces started expanding, and it continues to expand even to this day. The railroad is going to have an impact on industry, business, culture. Even that's going to change a little bit with new people coming from other places and settling here. And even the architecture will change, because suddenly we go from what I'm going to call Spanish or Mexican vernacular adobe, which is traditional adobe, to now you start suddenly seeing frame houses with manufactured windows and doors, and even some imported architecture, such as one house down the street here, a bungalow built in 1913, will be designed by Trost and Trost, who are architects in El Paso, and they put an ad in the El Paso newspaper saying, oh, we're building a house next week up in Las Cruces for Mitchell Hayner, who ran the local lumber company at the time. They're also famous for the people that remodeled the El Paso Union Station and stuccoed it. It's since been de-stuccoed, but they were an architect on that magnitude that they could be involved with large railroad projects. So Las Cruces, even today, we get 4 to 7 flat car loads of lumber come in every week, gets unloaded and disappears within the week in the new houses.
Wow.
There's one house on the corner of Las Cruces Street and Raymond Street by the park, southwest corner of the intersection. It is an 1885, 1895 Queen Anne story-and-a-half house. When you see it, it's covered with shingles made in the great dismal swamp of Virginia sawn and then machined into shingles and shipped west on the railroad. But the house has extremely high-pitched roofs, and that was a house designed from the Midwest or Northeast, designed to shed snow, something you
Wow.
don't get a lot of here in Las Cruces. So even that impact, somebody saw the design in a catalog, said, let's build it. And very, very steep roof pitches.
Wow. So I understand there's an upcoming program called the History of Houses Walking Tour. Can you talk to us about that?
Once a month, I take a group of visitors or townspeople, starting here in the ladies' waiting room behind me. We take about a mile-long walk, and it lasts about an hour, 15 minutes, depending on the number of questions we have. We start down Las Cruces Street. We dogleg onto Raymond Street to take a look at the Women's Club, which is a very important building in this town because the ladies got together in 1898 and bought the land for what you call Pioneer Park, because before then the children could only play in the streets of Las Cruces. Then we stop in front of what used to be called Court Junior High School. I think it's Alma de Arte Academy now. But that's the 1930s building that even got commented on by the state school superintendent as being elegant and in the Santa Fe style. Then we go back to Las Cruces Street, head down past Thomas Brannigan's house. Then we stop at Reverend Newton's house. Then we stop at Reverend Judge Numa Charles Frenger's house, which is the large stucco house on the south side of Las Cruces Street, just west of Alameda. And that house was actually built by Mexican laborers to the judge's design. The judge had served in the Rough Riders. He and his wife loved the house. It was a spectacular Spanish or Mexican colonial, and it is said to be haunted, whether by the judge or his wife, I can't tell you. Then we go back up to one of the side streets, go down to Griggs Street and visit Sam Bean's house. Sam is the brother of Judge Roy Bean, law west of the Pecos, and it is a beautiful transition era adobe. It's actually a true adobe, whereas most of the houses today are stucco over frame. And Sam's dad was named Sam too. He was a judge and a tavern keeper here in this town. So apparently the Beans had a habit of getting involved in taverns and the law. Judge Roy Bean had a tavern in Silver City. Guess you can be a judge and have a tavern. But then we wander back down to F.J. Scott's house called the Almeida House on Miranda Street, and then finish there and come back to the depot. But it's a good walking tour, but I always recommend the visitors use the facilities here and get a drink here, because once we go out the door, it's pure walking.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
It
Love
does
the
sound
town.
fun.
Love the adobe architecture, especially Jacobo Chavez's house down on Griggs Street. It's a very big stucco house opposite the church that's part of the 828 studio. I think it's a Baptist church that's no longer a church. But
Okay. So that little area you described really came about because of the railroad?
that whole area, with the exception of a few houses like Chavez's house, which probably predates the Mexican War from what I've seen. The house is that traditional. But most of the houses on the tour will be 1880s, 90s to 1920s, 30s, and there are a couple 40s era houses in there, but that's pretty much, they're now just getting good and historic.
Okay.
I could actually make that tour much longer, but I don't think most folks would take a 2-mile walk. We're going to be doing Mesquite Street next, and that'll be a 2-part tour because there's so much
area
on
to
that
cover.
street.
How cool.
So we're sitting here in the train depot now. And what was the original layout of the depot?
The building you're in today, which we will probably walk through later, we're actually in the baggage room. If you want to use the term, compare this to an international airport, which is what it was when it was built. You could buy a ticket from our ticket agent to any town in Mexico, the United States, or Canada that had rail passenger service, and you could do it till 1968. Well, we're in the luggage handling room. And the doors you see behind me open onto the Mesilla Street side of the building. The doors you don't see on the other side of the room open up onto the railroad platform. Luggage came in this door when you went on the train, got loaded on a wagon that's opposite me, and then hauled out to the baggage car. Or if you were coming into town, your luggage gets loaded from the baggage car onto the wagon, brought in here, and then gets transferred to either Mr. Link's local shuttle, which at that time was horse-drawn, or you could pick it up with your car. The room south of us, to our left, was an express room used to handle parcels. Think UPS, DHL, FedEx, except instead of using trucks and planes to move it, they used railroad passenger train. The room at the farthest end of the building, which we use as a classroom, was a freight house where they would unload very large, even boxcar loads of freight into the building, weigh it, bill it, and then put it on wagons or trucks. Behind me to my right, through a doorway that didn't exist till the city got the building, is the women's waiting room. And the restroom directly behind me to your front was the original women's restroom. When the building was built, the men's room was in the express room, so the men actually had to walk out onto the platform in the weather, go into the express room to use the facilities. Later, the railroad moved the men's room, and it's opposite the ladies' room. Farther down at the end of the vestibule hallway where the ticket agent's office is, was a doorway that lets you into the men's waiting room. You may wonder, why do we have 2 waiting rooms? Why are we segregating them? We aren't. If the men want to sit with the wife and the children in the ladies' room, the only thing they can't do is chew tobacco, smoke cigars, light cigarettes, or tell bad jokes. No big problem. If they want to do all the above, they got to go to the men's room, waiting room, and shut the door. And in between the two are the ticket agent's office, which had a door into the women's waiting room and a door into the men's waiting room, but normally passengers were never allowed in the ticket agent's office, 1, because money's being handled, and 2, because the bay window side of that office was like the air traffic control tower at an airport today. the men that worked at the double desk actually controlled train movements on the first 2 tracks outside the depot. The closest track is the main line between El Paso and Albuquerque. The second track is a passing track where 2 trains can pass around one another. Beyond that is the yard, which is under nobody's control. So when the engines are in there, they have to keep an eye out that nobody else is moving around the yard with an engine. But this is an important building. It's the gateway to Las Cruces if you're coming into town. It's the portal to the world if you're traveling out of town. And it does it for 58 years. It was a freight house for another 20 years till 1988. Then it was abandoned, and the city bought the building and turned it into the museum you see today.
Can you tell us about the passengers and what they looked like?
We have 2 really good pictures of passengers at the station, actually 3. If you go into the ladies' waiting room behind my right shoulder and turn right, on the wall closest to the ladies' room is a 1910 photograph of people getting off the El Paso, what we would call the accommodation or local train. And they're dressed wildly different than we are today. One lady is in a white long dress made out of cotton cloth. Good move for her, and a large, what we would later call picture hat for shade. She is next to a little person in a stroller who's dressed in cotton cloth. The little person's under the age of 5, could be a boy or girl. We don't know. The next lady next to the stroller is dressed in a black broadcloth dress. Broadcloth is linen and wool mixed with a large hat. Everybody else in the picture is dressed in wool. Now remember, no air conditioning on the railroad cars except the windows are open with cinders blowing in from the coal-burning engine. No air conditioning in the depot. We're in a desert. But that's the way everybody dressed here at the time. And in the corner of the picture, you'll see an old gentleman getting ready to tip his hat, which tells me there's a lady standing next to the photographer, because a well-bred gentleman always tipped his hat to a woman when he met her. In the corner of the room, there are about 6 or 7 people standing. Most of them are in linen. It's 1930. They're getting onto or off of the passenger train here. But one old gentleman in the left corner of the picture is wearing wool. We're still in a desert. And the railroad trains aren't going to get air conditioned for another 6 to 8 years. So they're pretty bold people. But to the right-hand corner of the picture is Fabian Garcia. Mr. Garcia is born in 1871 in Chihuahua, Mexico. His grandmother, after his parents died, moved him to Mesilla, where she lived with a family as a housekeeper. They sent him to school with their children. He later went to what was called the New Mexico State Agricultural and Mechanical School, which you all call NMSU today. And he later rose to the associate dean or dean of the agricultural school. He passed away in 1947 and is buried in the Masonic Cemetery. But he introduced pecan trees and several varieties of chili peppers to the agricultural economy of Donna Ana County. So he's a very unusual man. And that's the important folks in there. The last picture we have of people traveling by train is in the express room where our model trains are. If you look at the lower left-hand corner picture on the end wall, it's of a red-nosed rail diesel car, DM 191 or 192, and there are people getting on and off the train. It's about 6 months before passenger service ends here in 1968 because there just isn't enough traffic, passenger traffic, to keep that train going. Ironically, I ran that car later in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It still exists in Los Angeles at a place called the Southern California Railroad Museum, and hopefully they'll get it running in the next 7 or 8 years. It's about 80 years old.
Wow.
But it's part of Las Cruces' history. I'd love to cage them into bringing it back, but can't count on it.
Can't count on it. All right. So what are the roles of the trainmen, such as engineer or fireman?
Well, 100 years ago, you had 5 people on the freight train or passenger train crew, an engineer who ran the locomotive, which they do today. You had a fireman who fed the firebox coal or wood to raise steam for the boiler. Today, no firemen, they're long gone. You used to have a front end brakeman who rode in the engine cab. He protected the front end of the train with a flag or fusee. If they stopped where they weren't supposed to, he was to protect the front end and prevent a collision. Then on the rear of the train, you had another brakeman. We called him the rear end brakeman or flagman, and his job was to protect the rear end of the train with a flag or fusee if they stopped where they weren't supposed to, and the conductor who is actually in charge of the train. Today, the engine out front has an engineer and a conductor, and that's it. The brakemen are long gone. The conductor takes up their job. The thing the engineers probably even today grouse about, whatever a conductor says goes, because he's responsible for the safe operation of the train. The engineer just runs the engine in response to signals, radio, hand, or lantern from the conductor. And many engineers I've known thought they knew how to run the train better than the conductor did. And many conductors thought they knew how to run the engine better than the engineer did. So we made a point of never putting them in the same space at the same time because it's like two cats.
Smart.
Now they've got to ride in the engine cab together, and I still can't imagine it. But I guess they get along, sort of. Yeah. But today the railroads are shifting to new technology. Union Pacific runs some of the yard engines like these guys in their yard with nobody on board. The engineer walks around with a belt pack on his waist. He can control the throttle or the brake by radio. And other railroads are experimenting in satellite control. So within the next 5 or 10 years, you may see nobody on the engine.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Technology is changing.
So how was early communication between the stations and trains done?
We have a picture out here by the men's restroom from 1910, 1912 that shows the train order signal. The train order signal actually was on a mast. It had 2 hinged metal boards with lantern lenses attached at one end. If there were no train orders, permits needed to move the train on the line, the blade would be set in the down or 45-degree position, and that told the engineer you can keep going. But if there were train orders, new flight plans, let's use that, for the engine. Maybe some train got off schedule up the line and all the paperwork now isn't right, so the dispatcher will telegraph this train operator and say, I need new orders written for this train, this train, this train, this train. If they stop here, fine. You just hand a copy to the engineer, hand a copy to the conductor and say, see you later. But if they don't stop here, you have to use a train order fork we have out in the office. It's a Y-shaped stick with a string on the end. You tie the train order to the string, walk out on the platform as the train approaches. You have one for the engineer, one for the conductor. Hold the engineers up high enough they can stick his arm through the loop of thread. Train order pops off. He's got his train order. The conductor comes by on the steps of the caboose, catches his train order. If they get him, they can go. If either one of them misses, the train would stop down the line and the fireman or brakeman would have to run back and grab the missed train order, because this would be like trying to take your airplane off at the airport without calling the tower.
Right.
Bad things happen on the railroad when you got 2 trains going opposite directions in the same track. Now, we're about to pick up, we're missing our train order signal, but we're about to receive a 1912 or 13 semaphore that works the same way, except up on the blade is clear, 45 degrees is caution, be prepared to stop at the next signal, horizontal is red, meaning you stop now. And the Burlington Northern Santa Fe junked most all the sisters, but we applied to them last year for one, and they shipped it up to their signal shop in Springfield, Missouri, overhauled it, and it should be here in the next month or 2. We'll put it in storage, then we'll put a new footer out front and set it back up and demonstrate it. it'll be about a 113 or 14-year-old piece of technology for which there's no spare parts. But that's how they communicated for the radio. After World War II, you just ring them up on the radio. The engineer has one in his cab. They used to have them in the caboose say, hey, I have train orders for you. Stop. Today, they don't even have to stop. The dispatcher calls them on the radio. The engineer has a pad of blank train orders, and he'll be told, fill out this line, this line, this line, this line, and read it back to me. If it's correct, sign my name to it, time and date. And then the engineer makes a copy for the conductor right across the cab. Even though he heard the message, they both have to have paper copies of the message to move the train. So today it's all done by radio.
Very cool.
Cool.
So you said before about the firemen putting in the wood. How on earth did they have a train in Las Cruces, the desert, and no water for the steam engine?
Actually, the picture of the train arriving from El Paso in the women's waiting room right by the men's room door shows the water tank that stood on the other side of our passing track. The Santa Fe apparently had wells here and a pumping plant to fill the water tank. The water, of course, is dispensed into what we call the cistern on the steam locomotive's tender, the car right behind the engine cab, carries either coal and or oil and water to feed the boiler and keep the fire up. And to give you some idea of the consumption of water here in the desert, the Santa Fe had a class of locomotives called 2-10-4, 2 lead wheels, 10 drive wheels, 5 on either side, 4 trailing wheels under the firebox, 2 on either side. The engines weighed about 475 tons and could use about 23 tons of coal, 23,000 gallons of water. That engine could drain the 23,000 gallons of water out of the tender in about 2.5 hours.
Wow.
That's the size of a large home swimming pool. So during World War II, the Santa Fe had been experimenting with diesel-electric locomotives, like the ones out front that don't use any amount of water, any more than your car does for the radiators. And during World War II, they bought as many as the War Production Board would let them have. By 1957, the last steam engine is gone, which saves all the maintenance on the steam engines, saves all the water wells and pumping apparatus, saves all the oil and fuel handling. Suddenly, all you need to do is pump diesel fuel into the tank on a diesel, like your car. You occasionally check the oil level in the crankcase, check the water in the radiator. It's good to go. So the Santa Fe loved their diesels, and they love them today.
I bet.
So who are some famous people that rode these trains?
The only one I can swear to right now is Teddy Roosevelt. He visited here March 15, 1911. He was an ex-president. He was en route to Phoenix to dedicate the Roosevelt Dam. And apparently when he come up from El Paso on the Horn Toad, he thought he was in El Paso, New Mexico. So his staff had to cross out that and put, or El Paso, New Mexico, had to put Las Cruces, New Mexico on the cover, so Teddy got it right. But he had about a 15-minute speech. He filled the yard, and in the picture we have, there's a lot of guys that were in the Rough Riders show up in the picture because they're wearing military cavalry hats with the gold hat cord. Anytime Teddy showed up, they showed up because most of them were from southern New Mexico and southeastern Arizona. They were quite the character. Well, when Teddy left here, the train turned west at Rincon to go to Phoenix, went over several mountain summits. One of them, he saw a jackrabbit, so he had the conductor stop the train, and Teddy went hunting.
Wow.
Problem was, it was a single-track railroad, and nothing could move till Teddy got back on the train and it started rolling. So there have probably been many other folks that have visited here, but my knowledge right now is a little weak on some of them. This was a branch line. A lot of traffic went between Albuquerque and El Paso, and then El Paso to Mexico City. So yeah, I'll bet a lot of famous people stopped here when their train did. We still get freight traffic going through here to Mexico City and freight's coming out of Mexico City. So whenever you see the diesels out front, and they have blue or red masking tape over the engine room doors. That's a locomotive that went to Mexico City. Wow. When it reaches Ciudad Juarez, the customs people open all the compartments and make sure nobody's smuggling anything, shut the doors and put tape on them, and that tells the rest of the customs folks, we checked it.
Okay.
Wow.
We did a podcast recently on the Harvey houses. Was there any food or snacks here available?
Well, when this station was built in 1910, Fred Harvey, who died in 1901, his son Ford Harvey took over the company. He sent a letter to the Santa Fe saying, "You're building a new station in Las Cruces. We want space for a news stand." The reason we did not end up with a restaurant or a lunch counter or a hotel run by the Harvey Company is there's one of those in El Paso Union Station. There's another one in Albuquerque. There's a lunch counter at Rincon. There's another hotel at one time in Deming. We're just too close to have anything else.
Right.
But in 1910, our newsstand in the men's waiting room was run by a young lady named of Apollonia Archibald, 25 years old. She's listed in the census as a clerk in the depot newsstand. She runs the newsstand in the men's room. They have newspapers, periodicals, postcards, which Fred Harvey was famous for having the best, candy, cigarettes, and cigars. Now, the problem is, if you're a lady and you're sitting in the ladies' waiting room out here and you want to pick up a newspaper, you got to walk out on the platform, walk down to where the men's room door to the platform is. Next to it was a big window that'd be open with items on the counter for sale. You'd have to go there to pick up whatever you wanted, because it was very unusual in 1910 for a lady to walk into a room full of cigar-smoking men she did not know. That would just about ruin your reputation in the town, whether you're single or not. So that would change over time, of course. And at one point, the railroad took out the men's waiting room, moved everybody over to the women's waiting room. We think the Fred Harvey newsstand went out of business then here and became the telegraph office for many reasons. But we do have copies of at least one of the pancake recipes, because Fred Harvey also ran the dining cars on the Santa Fe. So we got a dining recipe treat you can try at home.
Okay, I've got the recipe that you gave me for the orange pancakes.
It's for orange pancakes, and it's called the Harvey Girls Little Orange Pancakes, and they're supposed to be about 2 3/4 inches in diameter. The recipe will make 36 of them for roughly 3 people.
What are some other interesting items that we have here?
In the building, we're going to have a sewing machine in the men's waiting room, probably from the 1870s or 80s. They were very expensive. They ran about, in 1860, $120 a piece, which is about what a farm family made in 1860.
Wow.
So often 12 ladies get together, put 10 bucks in the pot, buy a sewing machine, then they go to the local tailors and pick up what we call piecework to be assembled at home. They bring the finished garments home and get paid for the labor. And in 1860, an overcoat with cape would take the lady 22 hours to sew by hand. She would be paid somewhere around 50 cents to $1, and the coat would sell for $6. If she had a sewing machine, she could do it in 7 hours. So she could earn 3 coats out in the time she would do 1. We don't realize that's such a huge change. There are other items in the various cases, some related to railroading, some related to Las Cruces, some related to the telegraph here in the station. This building was a gateway. There's also posters from at least Carlsbad Caverns National Park and the Grand Canyon. Plus, there's one poster in the ticket agent's office where the Santa Fe is pushing this area as the winter resort country. And I've noticed we get a lot of folks from, Idaho, Montana, Michigan, way up north where they get lots of snow in the winter. We get lots of folks in Las Cruces coming to visit.
I see the plates out there.
Now, we also have the plates out in the case. 2 of them are from from a Santa Fe dining car. They're a little different, Harvey plates, but they're different from one set we have, which has dividers in, which is from a Harvey restaurant. The china was different between the railroad cars and the restaurants, and sometimes had different floral or other patterns, but they're very unique. Most of the Fred Harvey china you're going to see today has what's called a membrano design from the Membres Indians, and it's around the edge of the plate. It's very different from other railroads' china. Everybody had their own china pattern. The Santa Fe was peculiar to the Santa Fe.
What are some of the selling points for a passenger to take a train?
Well, the selling point for a passenger if you want to take a train, if you're here in 1881 before the railroad arrives in April, your stagecoach ride to El Paso, which is about 3 miles, will take you 10 hours. When the railroad train gets here, it drops to 2 hours.
Wow.
From here to St. Louis was about 12 days and 4 or 5 hours by stagecoach. That's 18 hours to 20 hours a day, with roughly 2 to 4 hours stopping in a very unique tavern on the stagecoach route. But by train, it would become 2 days and 5 hours to get from here to St. Louis.
Big difference.
Albuquerque was by stagecoach 2 days and 13 hours. By train will be 9 hours. And Tucson will be about 2 days and 15 hours on the stagecoach, and roughly about 9 or 10 hours by train. So the big selling point, you don't have to spend weeks traveling. And of course, as the train speeds pick up, the later trains on the Santa Fe, you can go from Chicago to LA, which is about 1,100 miles and 39 and a half hours.
Wow.
And of course, today you will cover that in a little longer time. There is a Amtrak train through Albuquerque called the Southwest Chief, Chicago to LA. There's also one from LA to New Orleans through El Paso. I don't have the times on the top of my head, but usually it's about a 3-day ride. And if you're wanting a little more luxury, they still have sleeping cars on those trains.
They do, huh?
Yeah, sleeping
I've always
cars
wanted to do that.
and dining cars.
So when did passenger train service end for this line? We see trains now. Can you tell us about the trains that are running outside here today?
1968 here, roughly about April, because there just wasn't a lot of traffic. The last train on this line was train 13 and 14, called the El Pasoan. And before 1966, it was a diesel locomotive, baggage car, mail car, coach, and at the very end, the coach had several seats taken out for a vending machine called a meal mat. Fred Harvey basically would stock the machine, but they had to put a generator under the car to run the food dispensing machine, and the car had problems with its bearings, wheel bearings overheating, so they actually replaced it with a self-propelled diesel car called an RDC. Some people around here call them doodle bugs, and it ran till April 1968, then was moved to LA, where it would serve much longer lifespan in the commuter pool. The problem by the 1960s was the interstates weren't quite here yet, but they were coming, and many people had automobiles. So if you wanted to go to El Paso, jump in your car, turn it on, you're there in an hour or two. Or today with road work, an hour or two. The train, you had to wait for it. And so that was a problem. And America wasn't prone to keeping its passenger trains. Before Amtrak came in 1971, there were 400 or 500 trains all over the United States, passenger trains. After Amtrak came in May 1st, suddenly it was 70 trains, and now it's down to probably 50, but they're starting to put more trains on. We're still a car culture.
We are a car
By
culture.
and large.
For the train lovers here, the Railroad Museum has some model trains running. It's so much fun to watch, even for an adult, I think. But can you tell us about the empty car outside, the caboose, I think it is?
Yes, ma'am. The railroad caboose out by our parking lot is one of about 15 survivors from the Burlington route, which was called the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy. Our car was built in 1890 for the Keokuk and Western in Iowa, which was absorbed into the Burlington route. And that car traveled all over the upper Midwest, Indiana, Illinois, some parts of Michigan, Wisconsin, Kansas, and not as far as Wyoming, I don't believe, about as far as Denver. But in 1959, our old car, which served as the home for the conductor and his office, if they had to stay out on the line overnight, there's your home. It's got bunks, it's got a kitchen, it's got a desk for the conductor. It got sold to the Fort Worth and Denver City in 1959. And it ran between Fort Worth and Denver. It cut through the two northeastern counties of New Mexico, which technically makes it a historic railroad car from New Mexico.
Very
if it
good.
hadn't been sold, I might not. But in 1970, at 80 years of age, the car was sold by the railroad to the Acre family here in the area, and they used it for a while as their ranch house. They actually made some alterations to the interior, which will have to be mended over time. But in 2010, they donated it to the Railroad Museum. It was moved here in a lowboy truck and set into place where it is today. Unfortunately for us, as historians, the crane operator that picked the wheel sets off the truck and set them down happened to break the wooden frames on both trucks. So the car right now is temporarily blocked up on wooden blocks, but we're going to have to rebuild the trucks. And so I'll be looking for grant money over the next couple years, totaling about $150,000 to $250,000, because there's only 2 or 3 railroad shops in the U.S. that can work on these trucks. They were state-of-the-art passenger car trucks in 1890, but they're unknown today because none of them are in use anywhere on the railroads. But she is in a magnificent car. I also hope to get her repainted back into the Fort Worth and Denver paint, which is what makes her a New Mexican car and not an Iowa car.
Very cool.
Nice. For our listeners, can you please tell us what hours you guys have for the museum?
Our Railroad Museum is normally open Tuesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and it is free. We're open on Saturday from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We're normally closed Sundays, Mondays, and important holidays.
This has been a terrific time here at the Las Cruces Railroad Museum. It's a great local spot for kids and adults. I know a kid in his 60s, my husband, who used to work for the New York City subway. He's going to come down here after I show him this video and audio. And I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to show us around and telling us all your information that is so meaningful to our listeners.
Thank you for visiting, and I do hope we'll see more folks here. The railroad station is a very interesting building, and we love showing folks our artifacts. And we change things from time to time. So you may see that railroad signal show up in a year or two out in the front lawn. We're also going to be putting another railroad signal from this line out in the front lawn. So when they're running, I'm sure everybody down Las Cruces Street will be wondering where the new traffic light came from.
Well, that does it for this episode of Preserving History and Democracy. We'd like to thank our special guest once again, Mr. Kyle McGregor, for joining us. And thanks to Bern for finding another incredible topic for us to discuss. I want to thank Jacob Slaughter behind the cameras for everything that he does. Make sure to follow us on all our social media platforms and make sure to listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll listen to you next time.